How all y'all doing? I actually practiced that, and that's how bad it comes out. My name is Tommy T, and I'm an alcoholic. Tommy! You think we could get Steve to say anonymity one more time? That was cute. I just have to try to gather myself a little bit here, because when Steve said this isn't the big night, this alcoholic's ego was shot. So, it's big enough for me, believe me. It's bigger than home group, and I'm nervous. So, but there's something that doesn't escape me. What an honor it is to be asked to do something like this. Because for every man or woman in this room that got sober before 1995, thank you. Thank you for keeping the sacred place of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was my last stop on the bus, open for a guy like me. And with that babbling newcomer nonsense that we come in with, how it's everybody else's fault and I did nothing, you just don't understand. If you had a father like me, you'd drink like me too. Thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for telling me to shut up and sit down. I don't know anything about recovery. All I know how to is to burn my life to the ground, because that's how it was when I came in April 8th, 1995. I want to thank the people that worked for 12 months. I know what it's like to put something like this on. I run a men's retreat, trying to gather alcoholics together. It's kind of like herding cats. It's not an easy thing. So for all the patience and tolerance you did over the last 12 months with all the questions and last-minute requests that happened, thank you. Thank you. My man Lee, awesome. It's getting to the point we're getting old together, pal. I mean, it's like 20 years I know this guy now. It's getting crazy. As I got my Medicaid card a couple months ago, how did this happen? My wife looked at me, I was almost in tears, and she said, "You're one of the lucky ones. You made it." God, it's all perspective, right? But it's crazy. But I wouldn't trade this life in Alcoholics Anonymous for anything. And, to my friend Steve, I met Steve a couple of years ago at a sober golf club event down here in Arkansas. And you may get from this talk that I'm a little sarcastic, but I hope not over the top. I want to be respectful. But we're sitting around a table, having barbecue for breakfast, as you guys do down here. And here comes this jawhead, and I mean that it was high and tight. You could have hit a 3-wood off the top of his head. And he comes walking in his swagger. You see how low energy he is, right? And I'm sitting there looking up at him. And there was a gentleman sitting next to me that I just met, and he had 2 very big fake diamond earrings, right? So Steve goes through the table shaking everybody's hands. I stand up, "How you doing?" And he looks at the guy next to me, and he looks at both ears, and he says, "Oh, isn't that special?" I hit the floor. I said, "This is my guy in Arkansas from now on." But it's important he's responsible for getting me down here. So if I should say anything that offends anybody tonight, if my AA doesn't match up exactly how you practice these principles in all your affairs, let's hopefully you do that, please talk to Steve after the meeting. Because my feelings are already hurt about the small night crack. So, we'll try to get through it. And there's 2 people I want to call out. Your local archivist, young lady, I don't remember her name, and your Grapevine representative who took the time this afternoon to welcome me and tell me what they were doing here in service. I've been in the service structure for 28 of my 30 years here. And my sponsor used to always tell me, always introduce yourself to the people doing service, because they're going to be there next year when you go back. So thank you. Thank you for that. It's wonderful. Wonderful to see such an active district. It's really good. Because many districts up in New York are not active. So I'll just leave it at that. I won't bash the whole fellowship before I even get started. I found this prayer years ago. A friend of mine, Bob B. from Minnesota, gave me a book to read, and nowadays I take suggestions. It took a long time, but it was a book by an overeating rabbi who used our 12 steps to overcome his weight and food problem. And he had a wonderful non-denominational look at our 12 steps. It just opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And it was called Recovery, the Sacred Art of Recovery. And his name was Rami Shapiro. But he calls this a second step prayer. But I just think it sums up what we do here in AA. So if you would indulge me, I'd just like to read this prayer. This is not for you. This is just to settle me down a little bit because I'm excited to be here with you folks. And I only hope that two things come out of this talk tonight. That you say, hey, that guy Tom, he's a little bit of an asshole, but he really loves AA, because I do. And the second thing is those folks that sat with 6 months or less, more importantly, that, hey, I did things like he did too. And if it worked for him, maybe, just maybe it can work for me too. That's the only two things I'm shooting for. I keep the ball low for myself, you know. But here's the prayer. It goes like this. My God, the soul you have placed in me is pure. I am free to live today differently than yesterday. Because it is pure, I am free to live without the burden of past habits, past fears, past mistakes, and past failures. I am free to look at my past without repeating it, to examine for lessons to be learned and amends to be made, to draw from it what guidance I can to live differently today. My God, may I use today's gift of freedom to further my capacity to serve you by serving your children with justice, compassion, and humility. Whenever I say that prayer, I get a little fuzzy, because you guys have taught me so many things that I came in here with fixed ideas about what a real man was, and real men don't tell their problems. What happens in this house stays in this house. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Put your shoulder up against the wall. And you guys have taught me, get out of yourself, go help somebody else. And it works every time. Not 9 out of 10, every time. It's the reason I sponsor a bunch of guys in this. It's not that I like them. It's not. It's the fact that when I'm going through what I would call a luxury problem in my life, just a grown-up problem, you know, with a wife, 4 kids, and 3 grandkids, and a lot of them living in the house still, and I'm losing my mind about something, and it's just internal. Everything's internalized. And one of these guys calls me with an early recovery issue, or better yet, relationship problems. And I just instantly get out of myself. And then, many times I'll find myself giving them some advice, and then I'll hang up the phone and say, I should probably try that. And that's how it's worked for me for a lot of years. And because I am not, they say it returns us to sanity. Yes, as alcohol and other things, you know, all the abuses we did, but not as my thinking. I'm 65 years old, almost 30 years sober. I had to sit 5 years early because I'm 6 weeks shy. But my thinking has not improved much. I can spiral down in 15 seconds and have myself living in some little tent somewhere eating cat food and nobody loves me. And it's only because the mortgage is due Friday. I get paid Thursday. Everything's going to be fine, but that's how this mind works. And it's always worked that way for me. As a very young kid, I grew up in a real bad alcoholic home. My father was a real, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You didn't know if you were going to get gifts at 2 a.m. because they fell off the truck, or if you were going to get thrown out a window because you didn't put your bicycle away. You never knew what was going to go on. And there was a period there in my like 10 to 16 thing where my mother, who was a saint, she was a saint. She married him when she was 17. It was the only man she ever loved, only life she ever knew. And she tried to help him, and she tried to cover for him, and she did all the things that Al-Anon help ladies and men with when they're married to an alcoholic or in a relationship with an alcoholic, and she was just at wit's end. So she tried to join him because she couldn't beat him. So I had both parents drinking really alcoholically for about a 6-year period, a period which I ended up buying a tent and putting it in a local park for when things got too bad. I would go sleep in the park. And then I had a cot in a friend's garage for a while just because I didn't know what to do. As a young kid, I saw things that no kid should see, and I heard things that no kid should hear. And it just made me feel so different, so separate from my friends. My friends, it was a tight neighborhood, middle-class neighborhood, civil service, everybody working, bus drivers, cops, firemen. My father was an engineer. And we would all go to different kids' houses. And I stopped going because I couldn't invite you to my house. You never knew which parent was going to be on the floor naked. The cops were there, the firemen were there. There was one point me and my sister wanted to paint the curbs in front of our house yellow. So the emergency vehicles would always have a place to park. I mean, that's how busy. We were that house on the block. And it just made me feel so different. I took on that, maybe my father was drinking this way because he had me. I was told I was a mistake very young. All these things just, as a young kid, I just didn't know how to process. And I wasn't talking to anybody about it. And I hung tough, living this life without anything in my system for as long as I could. But boy, 11 years old, these two guys named Jimmy said, "Hey, Tommy, we're going to go get some beers. Are you in?" And they were a little older than me. It was an Italian neighborhood. And I said, "I'm in." They said, "Well, you're going to need some money." I said, "No problem." I was a thief before I ever picked up a drink. I was a liar before I ever picked up a drink. If I hit 2 home runs, I'd run home to my father, tell him I hit 3 home runs. Then he'd read the article the next day. Because the only articles they get right in New York is when you get arrested. They get all that information perfectly correct, but hit 2, 3 home runs, they mess that up. And he'd say, "Why'd you lie?" And I'd have to look at him and say, "I don't know. I just never felt good enough." So, it's just trying to explain. I went through life with a tightness of chest. Now, I don't know if it was a panic attack or whatever, but it was with me all the time. And it was unbearable. So when these guys offered those beers and all I had to do was rifle some pockets, it was a trusting world back then. It was 1970. I'm dating myself a little bit. And we went down, and as we're walking down to get beers, all you had to do was write a note from your mother. And I wrote it with my left hand because she had terrible handwriting. "Now, please let Tom buy 3 quarts of Miller and a pack of Marlboros. Love, Millie." They knew us. Everybody. You didn't even need money. You could say, "I tell your mother to stop by Friday." But I wouldn't put the beers on their tabs just yet. That came later. But we're walking down there, and there's a junkie, this guy Glenn, and he's out in the open. And back then, junkies knew their place. They stayed in the burnt-out buildings or the park. They never came out on the street. Glenn didn't care. Glenn would steal from this neighbor's house and try to sell it to the next neighbor's house. He was brazen, to say the least. And he comes out of this nod, and he says, "Hey, where you guys going?" And we said, "We're going to get beers." He said, "Drink them warm, through a straw, you'll get messed up quicker." Back then, we followed directions. 25 years later, you come into AA, and a well-meaning, well-intended old-timer tells your son, "You got to get a sponsor. You got to work these 12 steps, live a spiritual life, find a higher power, get a home group." And you're like, "Nah, I got this." But that junkie on the corner, that's my life's coach, folks. That's my mentor. I will follow him to the gates of hell, So we went in, and I was in charge of getting them, although I was about 5'2". And I get the 3 warm quarts of Miller. I go to the counter, and I said, "Oh, my mother likes straws." And the girl just gave me the most pathetic look, like, "Your mother wants straws?" "Yeah, she's got a problem. Just give me the straws." So we went, and we are the borough of parks. We don't have woodlands like you guys do and wildlife like you down here. We got rats, pigeons, and trees, right? It's a little different. But we would go in, and if it was cold out, you had the one drinking glove, your little fire. I had a boom box. Remember the boom box back in the 70s for some of you? It was an 8-track player, if you remember. And the big album that year was Neil Young, Harvest, and the big song was A Needle and a Damage Done. Real sad, junky, addict song. And we sang it poorly at the top of our lungs. Now, I don't know. I didn't identify this that night. But after coming to you folks, I drank alcoholically that first night. So my friends, they used the straws. I just chugged it down, got it all over me. They did something I have never done in my life. They started putting the caps back on their bottle. I threw mine away instinctively. Like, this is going down. It wasn't even a 40 yet for the younger kids. It was a quart. This is going down. And the magic happens. You hear it all the time. That tightness of chest left. I felt a little taller. I felt a little better looking. I felt definitely stronger. Beer muscles is a real thing, I'm telling you. So I pushed this one guy, Jimmy, down, and I grabbed his. They said, "We're putting it away for tomorrow, Tom. It's only Friday. Tomorrow's Saturday." I said, "The hell with that. I'll get more money." And I took that beer, and I chugged his down. But I made like a tactical error. I went after the small kid first, so I was able to get his away from him. But then I turned my attention to the bigger Jimmy, and he was in good shape and a good fighter on the wrestling team. And I went after him, and I'm all sloppy at this part because, I never realized that I'm going over the line. I'm too busy going over the line, so. And I could explain my drunk-a-log to you for the next 23 years in what happened after that. He threw me a beating. I woke up, it was like 12 midnight, and I don't know if you had it down here, but back then, you had to be on your front porch when those street lights went on. That was the rule. Just make sure you're on the porch when the street light. I couldn't even find my porch. I'm 11 years old. I'm hammered for the first time. I have vomit all over me. I have a cigarette burn. I wasn't even smoking the cigarettes. My radio's missing. My friends are missing. And I'm playing my favorite game of Alcoholic 20 Questions. You know, what happened? Where's my radio? Did we have any fun? But then, because of the blood and stuff, did anybody else get hurt? And that's been my life. That's been my life. There's always been consequences to my drinking. Almost every single time I pick up, some drama happens. But the sneaky part of our disease is they slip in one that goes good every now and then. Right? Every 50 or so. And this mind will tell me that's how it's going to be. But it's never like that. And I chased that for 23 years, and it's a little part of my story. I would like to tell you that I am fully healed and fully okay with my past, but that would be a lie. Chasing alcohol, and back then, you know, there was a lot of things going on in the 70s and 80s, but I have the utmost respect for Alcoholics Anonymous. We all did other things that we're not proud of. But at 16 years old, I stole money from my grandmother, who was my everything. She was actually my higher power for my first 10 years of sobriety because I had a whole thing with religion. I don't want to go into that. But I loved this woman, and she loved me no matter what. She was dying of cancer. And I stole money from her. And one of the last things I said to her, she said, "Did you take that money, Tommy?" And I said, "No, Grandma, I would never do that. I love you too much." Now, to some people that have done some things in this room, that might not be a big deal. When I tell you that burnt a hole in my soul from that day on, because I was even too crushed to go to her to the cemetery where she was buried. I went to the wake, but then I went to the bar. I couldn't go watch her be buried. I was so shameful. At 17, I got a girl pregnant, and we put that boy up for adoption. There was no terminating pregnancies or anything like that. She came from a very religious household. His name's Matthew. He's 47 years old. I've never met him. Fast forward a little bit longer. Another girl gets pregnant. I figure marriage will fix me. I get married. I gave her, and this is a bad joke, but I gave her the best 6 weeks of my life. And this alcoholic will run out on a woman 8 months pregnant and never look back. And I didn't see that boy for 8 years. If you were my friend, I stole from you, I lied to you, and I let you down. Ladies, if you were stupid enough to fall in love with me, and I'm real good at getting a girl to fall in love with me, I just don't know what the hell to do with you afterwards. No relationship lasts longer than a year because you get in the way of my drinking. And I'm not man enough to tell you that I don't have those strong feelings that you're telling me that you have for me. So I will just treat you so poorly, you'll have to break up with me. And the only reason I know the number is because of our first fourth step and sex or relationship inventory. I did that 23 times. I was in the same exact relationship with different women over and over again. And if you asked me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, "Tom, why is it you can't stay in a relationship?" I would look you in I'd put my hand on the Bible and say, "I don't know. I always date the crazy ones." And I believed it. And you know, how does this alcohol, I have to be honest with the man or the boy that I was. As long as I had alcohol and a good victim story about what you did to me, I was okay. Oh, I had no other opportunity with Matthew. So on Father's Day, I'd get twice as drunk. On Christmas, I'd get three times as drunk and blame her family for making us put the boy up for adoption. There was no way I was raising a child back then. Same thing with Brett and his mom. I just blamed her. Twice as drunk on Christmas, 3 times on Father's Day. And in that state of mind, it didn't bother me that much. It was a wave of sadness and then oblivion. And I did that for a very long time. There were arrests. There were a lot of problems in my life. You know, no boss ever appreciated the great talent they had. I never went anywhere. I was a janitor, in the New York City school system. And Why aren't they making me handyman, you know? Well, try showing up to work 5 days a week, you might have a shot. But, you know, I didn't see it that way. I had the sick time coming. I could take days off, like every 2 days after payday. And, but then I had the worst 5 years of my drinking, and that was 1990 to 1995. I should tell you, I was a bass player in the middle of the 70s and 80s in New York City. So there's a lot of blackout stuff. There's a lot of deviant stuff. There's a lot of trouble and crimes involved in that. And that's how I was living. And in 1990, I got arrested for I think it was my second DWI, and they mandated me in some programs. And I am very good when the chips are down. I can do what I have to do to tell you I'm sorry, to lie to you for a little while, to be good for a little while. But then because I know I'm going back to my old lifestyle. I'm the most dangerous when things are good. I will sabotage myself every single time. There's a line in our big book that I love. It says he has a brilliant future ahead of him and for his family. And then he tears it down with a series of useless sprees. I have done that hundreds of times, folks. I've had many opportunities in my life, and I have blown every one of them. I used to think potential was a compliment. It's not. Oh, the boy's got potential. No, that's not a compliment, all right? That means he's screwing up everything he's ever got. But from 90 to 95, I'll give you a little snapshot of that, and then we'll get into the good stuff, the recovery stuff. 1990 to 1995, I had an experience with trying to control and enjoy my drinking. If there's anybody here in those first 6 months to think you can go back, that it's going to change, some miracle's going to change your drinking and you're going to drink like a gentleman or a gentlewoman, it's not going to happen. Not in my experience. But in the second step, it says, it is only in the last analysis he could be found. Well, I had some analytics to do. I had some work. I had to prove to myself. And so Friday night comes. I'm well beyond the clubs at this point. I'm 30 years old. I'm way too old for the clubs. I don't drink Alabama Slammers or drinks with umbrellas in them. I'm pounding Jack Daniels and beers with the 65-year-olds, you know. And it's in the gin mill. It's in the saloon. There's sawdust on the floor. A chicken dinner is a hard-boiled egg. There's a shuffleboard machine, pool table. I love it. Bookie at the end of the bar. It's my place. As Bill would say, I had arrived, right? Place smells like beer and urine, and they're my people. And I would go there on Friday night, and I'd be sitting there, and I'd just be sitting by myself, because even in a crowded bar, I can be alone. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm just there I have a reason to be there. And I'd be drinking, and either a woman would be lost, got a flat tire, or she's one of us, and she's looking for that gin mill where the husband won't look for her, and she comes walking in. I'm your guy. I'm 35 years younger than the other guys in the bar, right? I got an apartment right down the street. Oh, your husband doesn't treat you right. I hate when that happens. Men can be such idiots sometimes. Beautiful woman like you. You know, and I would tell you, like, you know, if a young lady came in. But the truth is, if any woman came in, I was in that mode. And the bartender would give me the wink. I would grab a six-pack of beer. We would go down to that apartment. We'd have a romantic evening. We'd wake up the next morning. She'd remember my name. She still liked me. I didn't go over the line because I was with her. I would take her to breakfast. I would open the car door. My grandmother taught me well. Gentlemen, open the car door. Pay for breakfast. Get her number. She'd go in her home or to her car. And I'd drop the number out the window. And then my mind would start spinning. You're making more than you have to about this alcohol stuff. You can control it. You're going to be okay. There were no consequences from that evening other than a one-night stand. You'll be okay. So I'd go out Saturday night after battling myself all Saturday. Go out, don't go out, go out, don't go out. I'd sit in that same stool. I'd order that same shot, that same beer, but no woman would come in. So my mind would say, go look for a woman. I was not looking for a woman. I was looking for trouble and other things. Because at that point, I would get so messed up that even if I met a woman, I was too drunk to do anything. A bill in the book says, right, my drunkenness kept me out of those scrapes. Yeah, it's kind of hard to look sexually attractive when you're covered in vomit and tripping over yourself, right? But I'd give it a shot, but it wasn't working. But I'd wake up now same night, that it'd be Tuesday. I didn't call into work Monday or Tuesday. That's a problem. I reach into my pocket. Well, first I look out the blinds to see where I am. Okay, I'm in Manhattan. I can get home from here. Reach into my pocket. Oh, I got some money left. Thank God. I pull out 5 ATM slips. I wiped out the bank account in a 4-day blackout. I look over at the bed. There's a cross-dressing dude in the bed. How'd that happen? Again. I don't know about this rigorous honesty stuff. It doesn't get easier to say that, believe me. I'm praying. So that went on for 5 years. And what would happen is I was able to stay away from alcohol and other things based on the debacle that my drinking caused. So you crack up a car, everybody in my neighborhood cracks up a car. Everybody drinks, everybody gets arrested. You know, I once at a business meeting at the Department of Education at City Hall, because now, fast forward a lot of years, I'm a pretty successful executive. And I blurted out at the dinner table, well, everybody gets arrested, right? It was like that old commercial when E.F. Hutton talks. The whole table got quiet. No, Mr. Taracco, I've never been arrested. No, you've lived this sheltered life. You know, and I just went on to the next subject. But, a car accident, 6 weeks. I'd stay sober. One time I beat up one of those 65-year-old men in an argument about a Super Bowl I wasn't at and he was. I felt real bad about that. That was a couple of months. You wake up with Alex, all right, 3 months. That's pretty bad, But then my mind would start telling me it's going to be different next time. And I'd go back out. And that brings me to like April 6, 1995. My sober date is April 8th, 1995. And I went out for a couple of beers with some friends. I don't recall the events of the evening. The evening ended with a 21-year-old cop with his foot on my face in a very rough neighborhood, 2 blocks away from a city high school I was working at. I was taking this guy that's doing life for murder right now back to the city high school so I could start the boilers up and get a day's pay. And we were going to party in the boiler room. And the cop said to me, because they found a handgun, it was my 3rd DWI, and I had a lot of non-conference approved party favors in the back seat that I just bought. And he said, if you move, I'll blow your effing brains out. And a tear streamed down this tough guy's face. And I said, you'd be doing me a favor. Because I couldn't believe I did it again. Spent 4 days in the Brooklyn House of Detention, or I like to call it my detox, my rehab. And I was different than the 30 guys in the jail cell with me. They all knew what they were in for. I was playing 20 questions with the CO. I had a gun. I never carry guns. Well, you were carrying it last night. You better hope it wasn't used in a crime. Oh, thanks for that mental image. Now I'm going away for 15 years. For 4 days I'm thinking I'm doing that, It was brutal. And then I had to do the old walk of shame. Mom, I need a place to stay. So I came to you folks with superior court cases, felony charges, going to work every day thinking I was going to get fired. That ex-wife of mine, the mother of my child, came back and said, I want 8 years back. I want you to take a skin and paternity test, and I want 8 years of back child support. And all I did was look at her and said, oh, your timing's great. Again, I'm the victim. I'm a victim. I'm playing a victim into recovery. And I did not come to Alcoholics Anonymous willingly. I fought it. They had me in 5 nights a week, a thing called treatment against street crime. I had to sign in everywhere I went. I had to give urine samples if they called me within the hour. I had to go to probation offices. I had to go to lawyers' offices. I mean, I think it's great. Nowadays, you can do a 28-day rehab, and then you go to a halfway house, a three-quarter house, a quarter house. You get an internship. You get some vested money, and you become a culinary arts wizard. Great. You got 2 years to recover. I was $138,000 in debt, and I'm not talking, that's not even credit card and IRS debt, where they send you a letter. Ooh. This is bookies, loan sharks. This is the bad guys. So in my early recovery, if a car backfired on Staten Island, I jumped over the hedges. I thought somebody was trying to take a shot at me. We all have our different experiences as we come here. I am so grateful for that experience because every single day I had a mandated place to be or I'm going to jail. And I got to tell you, back then I was in good shape. I'm a pretty good fighter. I like to think I'm a tough guy, although I'm like a duck on the pond. You know, everything looks calm on the surface, but underneath it's going where the legs are going. That's me. And in prison, like, I don't do good. I don't do prison well. You know, that door closes. I turn into a 3-year-old girl that you just took a prison away from. Where's my mother with bail? You know, like, but I can't let the guys see that. It was brutal. It was a brutal way to live. And with no recovery, no sponsor, no home group, none of the things that we enjoy today, it was unmanageable, to say the least. I thought the world was against me. Nothing was ever going to work out in my life. But after time, they started to pull back the nights of the mandatory stuff. And only because I could not control my own thoughts, my mind would play devious games with me to the point of suicide, where I thought, where could I get another gun? Because I can't live like this. I didn't go to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting until I was 10 months away from all alcohol. And I hated it. Hated each and every one of you. Say one more slogan, I'm going to slap the snot out of you. It used to drive me crazy how happy you folks were. But I went. But I would go at 5 to 8, and if the old-timers started in the back, let's start in the back. I would get up and leave the room or go to the bathroom because I was too afraid to say my name is Tommy T and I'm an alcoholic. You can't live like that at 35 years old. You just can't. You can't fake that. 9 o'clock, I would run out of the room, get in my car and leave and blame all you guys for not helping me. Meanwhile, I was afraid of each and every one of you. I didn't identify it as fear, but that's what it was. And then fast forward, I was talking to the guys in AA and a promotion opportunity came at the job. Now I'm going to the job for a full year, 5 days a week. Big deal, right? I'm employee of the month. And wrapped up. You talk about, restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm fighting with everybody, but I'm going. And I said, I don't know if I should put in for that. And they said, put in. We here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we stand up for what we've done in our past. We make it right, and we let God direct our lives. Okay? So I write 6 or 7 arrests down. I put in the application, and God fired me. So now I'm blaming AA for me not having a career. 17-year career with the Department of Ed down the tubes. I go to a men's meeting, and I'm crying, and you don't know what happened. I wish I could go back in time and slap that kid, because I took that meeting hostage. If you ever have a man at a men's meeting crying, and somebody says, do we have a burning desire? And he goes, ooh, don't pick him. You're going to be there all night. I kept them there because you could share as long as you want. I kept them there. I qualified longer than the guy qualified. But I'll tell you, folks, I'm going to talk a little bit about our 12 steps. But our triangle has 3 sides. And if it wasn't for the unity, our fellowship, you would have a different speaker tonight. Because there were 3 men in that room that I call the ninjas of sponsorship, that saw a young member struggling, looking to drink, and they circled the wagons, and they were the corniest old guys you ever want to meet. One was named Keep It Simple Richard, a retired fireman. The other one was Lucky George. He was a tattooed bookie from Brooklyn, used to use the F-bomb with God in the same sentence. He was hysterical. Chew a cigar, never light it. And then there was a little guy named Cocaine Vinny. So much for our traditions, right? But these 3 guys came up to me and said, Tom, God wants you on the golf course tomorrow. And I said, didn't you hear what I said? I have no money to play golf. I lost my career. You're not listening. They said, we didn't ask you for a financial statement. We're going to pick you up at 8 o'clock. Those guys showed up at 8 o'clock on the button, and they said the most spiritual thing you'll ever hear in Alcoholics Anonymous. Get in the car. Now, I didn't know this because back in 1995, there was not, I know you guys are the home of the big book. I know it. Believe me, I got trapped into doing something in Eureka Springs a couple of years ago, and I didn't know where I was. Believe me, it was a little crazy. But there was not, you really had to search somebody out for a step answer back then. We were a don't drink and go to meetings area. And what I didn't know was Lucky George had just gone through these 12 steps, and the boy was on fire. And they put me in the golf cart with him, and he started to say things to me that I had never heard. And things like, Tommy, I'm worried about you. I think you're going to drink. And I said to him, I'm not going to drink, George. I got enough AA in me now. I know that's not my answer. But I'm really thinking about killing myself because I can't live like this. I remember how bad I felt. And he said to me, I was talking to a couple of the older guys here, and, sponsors back then were not. They didn't give a shit about your feelings. I mean, and he said, well, that's a pretty permanent solution to a temporary job problem, Tom. Like he would not let me play the victim at all. He said, I guarantee you, if you come over my house 1 or 2 nights a week, he was retired, I was fired, we had time, He said, and you do what the book tells you to do. You never have to feel this way again. You can transform your life. The effort you put into this program is directly proportional to how you will grow. I never heard that. I heard go to another meeting. There was something different about George. The attraction was just unbelievable. And he said, you come over my house, I will cook you dinner. We will read from the big book. You do what the book tells you to do. And then I'm going to give you a cassette tape of a guy, Joe Hawk, in California, who did a talk in the Salvation Army in 1990, and he's going to reinforce it on the days that you're not here. I heard free dinner. I was unemployed. I know he's a Brooklyn Italian. He's got to be able to cook. I said, I'm in. And folks, it was miraculous. And I hope you have an experience like this if you haven't yet. I got excited. I got to that guy's house. Now, I'm 36 years old at that point. I got to that guy's house a half hour early every night. And I would sit there and say, am I too early? Am I going to bother him or his wife? And this and all right, it's 5-2, let's go. And the whole time I'm reading the book. I'm listening to the tape. This book, for you folks down here, came alive to me. I had read this book 50 times in early recovery because I couldn't sleep. And the old timers on Staten Island said, nobody ever died from insomnia. Read the literature. So I would fall asleep with the big book on my chest. If you're having problems sleeping even then, use the service manual. It's like a Quaalude. It'll knock you right out. But I read it like stories. I didn't know that the answers were here. I didn't see it as directions. I just read it as stories. When George read it to me and said, Tom, does Tom essentially drink because he likes the effect by alcohol? Yeah, Tom does. You can never safely use alcohol again. Never? Like I want to debate it, right? The only thing we have for you is entire abstinence. Oh, well, that's a little harsh. I was looking for a 6-step program to control drinking without consequences. That would have been my answer. But George was wonderful. And I was the first guy he ever took through the 12 steps. I didn't know that then. I thought he was a guru. He had 5 years, for crying out loud. He's an old-timer, And he was just wonderful. And we went through those steps, and it was just based on the attraction that George had and the things he was saying to me. I believed everything he said. In step 2, I did not believe in God. That came in step 9 for me. I would still be in step 2 if I had to believe in God in step 2. But I was willing to believe. And you know what, folks? I believe George believed. He was just too goofy, too corny. Like this had to be a God thing because this isn't a human thing, the way this guy was talking and acting. Step 3, we held hands and said a prayer. No white light. No big experience. But when I tell you how much my hands sweat and shook, I had never done anything like that in my life. It was very weird to me, but I was willing. The willingness that and then George does one of these. That's great, Tom. And he gives me a black and white notebook and says, next, we launch out on a course of vigorous action. And he was all giddy and stuff. And I'm like, 2 steps in a night, Spons. We can't do this. I'm a member of a 12 and 12 group, the Decker Avenue Step Group. So we do the steps over and over. And we talk about our experience with the big book with them and get all the 12 and 12 people crazy. But people come in and they talk about the 4th step. And they said, oh, my God. It's so difficult. I'm in my 4th step for 7 months. Now, I'm kind of an elder statesman now. I'm not the big book thumping evangelical idiot I was 25 years ago. So I will take them away privately. I used to blow them up right in the meeting. But I'll say, that's a dangerous thing to share for newcomers because you're not in your fourth step for 7 months. Oh, yes, I am. No, you're balking for 7 months and you're making everything else in your life more important than your fourth step and there's nothing more important in your life than a fourth step. And I'll say that to anybody in this room that hasn't done one. Or somebody with time that is sitting here feeling not right. Do some writing. It's in your head. It's rattling around in your soul. You're just putting it down and then you're going to tell somebody about it. Get it done. 9 days, start to finish. Resentments, relationship inventory, and fear inventory. George kept me in the column I was in. Just right about, I had 31 resentments for that alcoholic father. I had 29 resentments for a mother who wouldn't leave the only man she ever loved to save me. How do you raise a kid like that? One smothered me, one didn't love me. It was crazy. I had a resentment with a guy, Frank, because someone told me he told a girlfriend of mine something, and when I made amends to Frank 30 years later, he said, I never said that. When I made amends to that girl, she said, Frank never said that. I hated this guy for 30 years. Fancied or real. You got to get through that nonsense, or else it'll eat your lunch. At least it was eating mine. And then I shared that fifth step. We went to a glorious place on Staten Island, Mount Manresa. It was a retreat center where Don Pritz and Mark Houston and those guys used to do big workshops, just beautiful landscape. And there was 75 steps up to the spiritual mountain with a grotto. We chose that area to do it. But some of those things I told you today about waking up in bad places and being a deadbeat dad was a deep shame for me. Stealing from my grandmother was a deep shame for me. I had those. They didn't fit into resentments or fears. They were those things we take to the grave. But I had about 3 pages of that. And I ripped those out before I went up on the mountain. And I put them under my seat of my car. And I go up like a good little sponsee, and we pray up, and all right, what do you got? And I go through about 2.5 hours of resentments, maybe another hour on the other stuff. And George says, Tommy, I'm having a great time taking you through these 12 steps, man. This is awesome. You're doing such good work. And then he says, but if you're holding anything back, leave it on the mountain today. We're only as sick as our secrets. And you know what goes on in my mind? He knows. He don't know, but I'm saying he knows. And I said, straight face, no, George, that's it, bro. I'm having a blast too. And I turn around and I start walking down those steps, and it felt like George's eyes were piercing the back of my head like lasers. And I have the, if you remember, I think it was, that John Belushi movie many years ago, Animal House. Do it, don't do it, do it, don't do it. I'm like, tell him, don't tell him. No, you can't tell him that. This whole conversation. It's a committee of angels and devils. It's not just one or two. It's a busy place. And I go down to my car and I'm not telling him. I just can't do it. I put my key in the car. It was a warm day. And a rush of heat came up from under my seat. Now, I know some of you have had experiences like this where there's a breeze in a closed room or the sun hits you at a certain time But I was like, whoa, what was that? And without hesitation, I grabbed those papers. I opened my car door. George never came down from the mountain. And I said, George, wait up. And he said, come on up, kid. Let's finish this stuff. Okay. And I just moped up those stairs. It felt like it took me 2 hours. It was probably 30 seconds. And I laid out my top 10 or 15 worst. And George did something that I've done with 200 men since. He gave me an identifying comment with all my worst stuff. Yeah, Tom, things like that never work out for guys like us. Like he had done it too. To the sexually deviant stuff, he said, I never got a chance to do that, but it sounds like fun. So, I just gave him my worst. That made me feel like such a piece of garbage my whole life, and it was nothing to this man. And then he gave me the biggest hug. He couldn't pick me up. He was much smaller than me, but he wanted to. And he said, my house tomorrow, 6 and 7, I'm cooking pasta. And I hugged that guy. I kissed his bald forehead, and I said, I'll be there, brother. And I was excited. The miracle of the fifth step for me, and it might not be a miracle to many, but I never slept since I quit drinking. I used to pass out. I never slept. I put my head on that pillow that night, and I went to sleep in like 30 seconds. The chatter of 100 monkeys that I've always had in my head. What's going to happen tomorrow? What'd you do yesterday? Oh, this is going to... Things that never happen. I'll spend hours worrying about before I go to sleep. It was not there. And I woke up refreshed. I couldn't wait to get to George's house. We did step 6 and 7. We picked only maybe 5 or 6 character defects because there were so many glaring ones. We could have had a list of 50 and I would have got paralyzed. And he just told me to pray that prayer every day along with my 3rd step prayer. So now I'm attending meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a sponsor. I'm praying prayers. I'm not hearing the connection to God in my prayers, but I'm praying these prayers. And life starts getting great. It really does. Right up until the point I made that 8-step list. Because now I'm looking at all the mob guys I got to go to, all the drug dealers I got to go to, those 23 women I got to go to, $138,000, and God knows what the interest would be because you mentioned interest in the book, Jesus. I got petrified in fear, and for a guy like me, what do? I run. I don't go to the meeting George is going to anymore. We didn't have cell phones back then for the younger folks, so I just don't answer the house phone. I take the tape out of the old recorder that you used to have for an answering machine. I'm not answering George's calls. Within 14 days, folks, the suicide thoughts are back. I just wiped out everything that I did. I go to a meeting, and here's our fellowship again. God speaking through you. I don't hear God's voice directly. I've had that experience a couple times over 30 years where I really thought I got a clear message from God, but I always get it from the men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm standing outside of a beginner's meeting because if you're balking, where to go? Go to a beginner's meeting. Tell them you got 18 months and you're in the 9th step. They'll say, oh, slow down. You're going too fast. You know, they're not in the book. They're not going to, they'll co-sign all your BS. And I'm outside with 3 or 4 of my guys. We're smoking cigarettes. And a guy walks by and he says, Tommy, he's got 30 years. He's a postman. And he says, Tommy, I heard you going through the 12 steps with George. And I puff out my chest a little bit. I said, well, yes, I am. He said, would you like to speak at St. Mark's Step on Saturday? I said, I'm free. I could do that. He said, well, we're speaking on the 9th step. Well, I have a list, but I haven't made any amends, so I don't know that I could do that. He pats me on the back and he says, you got 3 days. Make a few amends. Let us know how they turned out. And he walks away. And the 3 guys I was with, and we'll be there with the guys to see. We want to hear about this. So fear of being judged, looking bad, all those things that are in my fear inventory drove me to call George. And you know what this man said to me? I haven't talked to him in 14 days. I said, George, I've been avoiding you, and I really would like to review the 9th step. I got to go out and start making some amends. He said, I was praying that you'd call. Come on over. Not come over tomorrow, not come over later. He said, I'm putting on coffee. You don't realize what you have here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I know I didn't. Go to get your hair cut now, fellas. You got to use an app. You can't even walk into the barber's where I live. You got to make an appointment. Go to the doctor. I had a heart problem in the summer. Oh, yeah. I'll see you November 6th. I could die 5 times by then, Doc. What's going on? Dentist. Oh, I have an abscess. Oh, I might have something next week. Call a good member in good standing in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's come right over. I'm putting on coffee. This place is great. Greatest thing on earth. We reviewed that, and I went out and made amends to my family the next day. I'm not going to go into the amends stories, but I have some great ones. I ended up having to write and read a letter to that grandmother before going to that meeting, and I couldn't even get through the letter. I was bawling like a little kid. If I look back at my life in hindsight, that was the day my attitude and outlook on life started to change. Grandma did something for me. I stood there and I could not get this letter out. And it was a brief letter. It was, Grandma, I'm so sorry that I was the child that you saw when you left. I stole that money and I lied to your face, and it's burnt a hole in my soul ever since. Can you please forgive me? I'm praying now, and I know you hear me. I'm doing good. I know you can see me. I'm going to make you proud someday. That was it, almost word for word. It took me about a half hour to get that out because I was crying so hard. I went down and did a qualification for the ages on 3 amends that I made. The guys came over to me and said, I don't know what you're doing, but don't stop. You're a different man here. And I started to feel it. I went out and knocked out 96 amends. Remember, I was unemployed. I made it my mission. That's what I was doing. And you know what, folks? I don't know the exact total, but folks didn't ask for all the money back. A lot of the worst guys I went to said, Tommy, we made a lot of money together. You were always a good guy. You just had a problem. Don't worry about it. But my nephew's got a problem. Would you talk to him? You know, Bill says in our 9th step, 9 out of 10, the unexpected happens. If I ever had the opportunity to channel with Bill and talk to him about where he screwed up, it would be that line. Bill, it's 10 out of 10 times. Anytime I thought something was going to happen in the 9th step, something happened. I thought I was going to maybe rekindle a romantic flame, I got slapped. I thought I was going to get slapped, she wanted a romantic flame. Go figure. I didn't know what. I don't know anything. But I know something. At that point, I was just coming up on 37 years old and 2 years sober. I never felt the connection with God that I did during that. And you know what George had me do? If you're afraid going to make an amends, take your school books and your stuff off the front seat of your car. Open the car door, say, God, get in. I need you. Close and put the seatbelt around him. 37 years old, sober. I'm doing this stuff. If anybody ever saw me, they'd be like, well, has he got an imaginary friend? What? But then I would walk into a business office and 2 chairs would be set up, and I'd be like, yes, I got a seat for God. And I just knocked out my amends. And folks, I hate to tell you, you got to make them all. Because I held back on a couple. But when I made those 2, maybe a year later, my next sponsor shared in a meeting, you know, he was sharing on 9, and he said, we have to make them all. And he said, the example that I would give you is Tommy held back on a few for about a year. And you know how he urged me to do it was he said to me, are you afraid to finish anything in your life? Oh, you want to challenge my spirituality? Let's go. You know, I'm doing it. And he said his 11-step inventory went to a whole nother level, and now he's so attractive as a sponsor he can't keep up with the guys asking. And I didn't see that happening. But when he said it from the podium, I said, wow, I do got a lot of guys asking me. I have been writing every night. Something changed, you know. And that's part of this message tonight is because we have a lot of older folks here with a lot of time. I don't think there's any ceiling on this program. Because coming up on 30, if I had 6 more weeks, I could have stood for that. It continues to get better. So I live my life today in 10, 11, and 12. I switched sponsors at George's suggestion because George was not writing nightly inventory. George did not make all his amends. And he saw that I had the desire to do that. He said, look for somebody. Keep me until you get somebody. And I saw this guy. His name was Angry Joe. He was a biker dude, big red beard, glasses, you know, the Harley Davidson scarf it, the Harley Davidson vest, the Harley Davidson, you know, he looks like a lot of you guys down here. Food in the beard, didn't shower as much as he should have, you know the type. And he would go into a meeting and he had 17 years sober and he would vomit on the room with his anger. People were afraid of him. I'm going through the steps with George over here. He's doing it on the other side of the island over here, but we would see each other at a meeting every now and then. All of a sudden, I'm having an experience. I see Joe come in. I don't even recognize him. He's cleanly shaven. He's got a flannel shirt on, jeans, work boots, no scarf it, no beard. He's got those round wire glasses, and he's sharing that he's had an experience with God. And he's going to be a Montessori kindergarten teacher. He's leaving the Harley Davidson dealership. Now, I'm having my experience over here, but I'm saying, this is sick. This is sick. And he went on to share about prayer meditation, how important it was, and his 11-step nightly review. And I beelined to that guy, and I asked him, will you be my sponsor? And that started 24 years of a relationship with a man that I've never had, even with my dad, granddad, or anyone else since. He knew everything about me. And he loved me anyhow. Even when I had my second surrender and was behaving really poorly in AA with 10 years of sobriety, he stuck by my side. He worked through me with it at inventory. He gave me directions. Never told me what to do. But back then, we had a thing called spiritual consent. I give you spiritual consent to call me on my BS. Well, this boy was not shy. And the way he would say it in such a calm voice, he'd say, well, Tom, would you consider stopping sleeping with women until you actually like them? Sounds corny, right? That would cut me wide open and make me look at things in areas in my life I did not want to look at. He helped me so much. And Joe was sick. Joe had a congestive heart failure. He was my sponsor for 24 years. We did a lot of things together. It was great. But he had a bad heart, and he always had a bad heart. But they wouldn't put him on the transfer list until he got, quote, sick enough. So this man went through years of doing service in GSR and sponsoring a ton of guys, sponsoring me, doing all sorts of AA things, being as active as he could, but he would faint occasionally. He would have to sit down in the middle of a flight of stairs. He couldn't plan any type of long walking excursion because his heart couldn't handle it, but he wasn't sick enough for the transplant. Whatever year COVID came in, we weren't quite all shut down though, but he sends a text out to the 13 men he was sponsoring. He said, I had an episode at home. I'm in the hospital, but I'm okay. They're getting me a heart. I'm getting a pump installed tomorrow. And we were like, yeah, Joe, that's great, And when they went in to put the pump in, they found cancer in his lymph nodes. So now they couldn't treat the cancer because the heart's too weak, and they're not going to give him the heart because of the cancer. So he could. So they sent him home with morphine patches and told him the most he had was 6 months. It was devastating to not only me, to the other 13 men, because he meant the same to them. So we had an idea. COVID hits, and we said, let's get a Zoom meeting together on Saturday, and let's attend meetings with Joe. Let's bring him a meeting. Now, I didn't know this, but his wife would tell us after he passed that she would have to prop him up and put a shirt on him, and he would never let on that he was that sick. But he would never miss that meeting. And I come from the sponsorship where you write that inventory and you have a set call time, and I call Tuesday nights at 9:30. He's in Ohio at that point, and I would never miss that call, and I would share that inventory with him. Well, when you know he's dying, and you're sharing about, oh, well, my wife didn't say thank you. It's like, it's bizarre, right? And I said to him, Joe, I really feel awkward sharing this inventory with you, with your physical health the way it is. And, it's just difficult. And he said, the half hour I spend with you, Tom, is a half hour I don't have to spend in my head. That's the man I would like to be someday. So as it got closer to Joe's dying, I called all the guys and I said, hey, fellas, why don't we get all our sponsees on and say thank you to Joe? He ain't going to have much longer. And they were all excited about it, like little kids. And they're all my age. We're not kids, And we had 85 men get on the last Zoom meeting with Joe. And there was two gentlemen up, and remember how the boxes were set up, and they were up in the right hand. It was Jay Green, and then it was John G. So you didn't really get the connection. But this old timer says, Joe, you don't know me, but I sponsor your sponsor. I got 51 years of sobriety. I just had to get on today to thank you for my son's life. Joe read A Vision for You with John Green on Tuesday, and he died on Thursday. Servant to the very end. This is what we get in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was heartbroken when I lost Joe. How do you replace? You don't replace that. But Joe, in his infinite wisdom, said, I want you to send a text to all your sponsees and tell them that you will have a sponsor within 30 days. And I said, Joe, don't worry about that. He said, send it. He said, you need adult supervision. So I said, okay, and I sent it. So on the 29th day after his death, I realized I got to get a sponsor. And I write 3 names on a list, and I shoot them to my service sponsor in New Jersey, a guy, Jimmy A. Very well-respected guy, big part of my recovery. Great guy, good program. And he calls me back and he says, Tommy, these are great men. And Carl, you will know many of them. They were all the usual suspects guys. And he said, I just think with your personality and the way you practice these principles, you're looking for an easier, softer way. Your personality will dominate these guys. They're great guys, don't get me wrong. But I think are you willing to pray a little bit? And I said, yeah, I'll pray. So I'm in the basement and I start to pray and the house phone rings. I haven't gotten a call other than a telemarketer on the house phone since the 90s, right? It's always on the cell now. I don't even know why we keep that thing other than too lazy to cancel it. And it's, hey, Tommy T, it's Harold Long in Missouri. How you doing? I put my hand on the phone and I said, not this guy, God, please. Now, I don't know if any of you know Harold H., but he's a Tom Iverson sponsee for many years, huge in the correction. He's a pastor. He hunts with a bow. It's not a match. You know what I mean? And he is literally the busiest guy I know in AA. And he asked me to do a big book workshop with him on Zoom because it was still the end of COVID, which I accepted. And then I just blurted out, Harold, I know you're really busy, but my sponsor passed. I don't know if you heard. He said, yeah, I did. I'm really sorry. That's a tough relationship to leave. I lost Tom. He was going through the same thing. He said, but I'd be proud to walk this journey hand in hand with you, Tommy T, And even saying that, I'm like, what am I doing, But then, folks, the great thing about this, I don't care how much time you had. I think I had 26 years at that point. He started treating me like I was a newcomer with 90 days. He said, well, we want to have this thing. We have this thing in Missouri that we have a covenant, and if I think you're lying, I'm going to call you on it. I'm going to let you into my life. I'm going to be honest with you, but I expect the same from you. And I said, okay, we call it spiritual consent here, but I'm on board with that. And he said, do you mind if I take that pretty wife of yours phone number? No, I live a transparent life. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll give you Cheryl's number. Because if I think you're lying about your marriage, I'm going to give her a call. Okay. Then he says, and what about those children you're always bragging about? You can have their number too. I'm making all these faces and everything, And then he says, do you have any commitments? And I said, yes, I do. I'm the sponsorship chair of General Services currently, and I'm the treasurer at my home group. He says, no, I mean real commitments. Are you going to the jails or the institutions? No, but I guess I can call Intergroup and see what's available. He said, well, do that and give me a call. Click. And I've been walking hand in hand with Harold for the last 4 years, and I can tell you now I'm very comfortable with him, and I'm establishing that relationship that this alcoholic needs. I can't have secrets, folks. When I'm asked to do something, I got to do it. Now, a friend of mine just said the other night, to the extent that I allow my life to be inconvenienced by alcoholics is directly proportionate to how I walk with God. I am so looking forward to retiring in June, not because I'm lazy. I've worked very hard for the last 45 years. I want to get busier in AA. Because when I'm busier with you folks, my wife loves me more. My children respect me more. That boy I walked out on for 8 years, he's my best friend. He's 39 years old, and he's 10 years sober with us. I have not met Matthew, but my wife's 3 children, because of Joe told me, you don't put your hands on Cheryl. This was 18 years ago, until you can come and tell me that you accept full responsibility for her children as they are your own. And I said, that's a little drastic, Joe. He said, tell me. That led me and my wife into about a 14-month courtship where I actually loved my wife before we ever hit the sheets. Something I never did. I'm embarrassed to say this, especially in mixed company. But I made love to my wife at 47 years old, and it was probably the first time I ever did that. She's my best friend. I wish she was here with me tonight. She's doing a women's retreat with her sponsor in Pennsylvania. But we have the best home. Our kids see us working with others. Our kids pray with us. Our kids are all grown. The youngest is 25. The oldest is 39. They come to our house to hang out. And that's that house I grew up in. That house is healing itself. It's an open AA home. I could never thank you folks for what you've done for me here and continue to do for me here. So my hope is when I leave here that I'm at that home group early. And I'm talking football with the guys, and I'm actually flirtatious with the younger girls. They call me dad now. It's not really a good role for me, but, I'll get through it. But folks, no lie. My eye is trained on that door for that person that walks in like I walked in 30 years ago. Afraid, thinking everything was over in my life, it will never get better, and I make a beeline to that person and say, hey, do you have a big book? Let me give you one. Can I give you my phone number? And I will text or call that guy the next day because I know how difficult that first phone call was to make. I will pull him in. I will introduce him to all the guys I sponsor. Because when everything is bad, you just come with us. And everything's going to turn around, I promise you. Thanks a lot for having me. God bless you guys.